I thought philosophy would save me. That if I read enough, I'd finally understand why I felt so wrong. Not sad, not broken, just wrong. I devoured Nietzsche, Jung, Tolstoy. I underlined everything. I filled notebooks, and I waited for the meaning to appear, for the suffering to make sense, for the ache to go away. But it didn't. The more I read, the emptier I felt. The more I knew, the more unbearable it became to live among people who didn't care. I stopped talking. I watched the world from behind glass, and I called it awareness. But the truth is, I wasn't more enlightened. I was just more alone. And somewhere between the pages and the pain, I quit. Part 1: The False Refuge. I didn't quit philosophy because it was wrong. I quit because I used it like a drug. At first, it felt noble. Reading Dostoevsky instead of drinking. Studying Jung instead of falling apart. Taking notes on Kierkegaard while everything inside me screamed. I thought I was evolving. Becoming wiser. More grounded. More something. But I wasn't. I was just running. Running from the silence. From the void. From myself. Philosophy became my shield and my cage. Every quote was a justification. Every theory was an excuse not to feel. I used big words to hide small truths. Like how I couldn't get out of bed. Or how I hated being touched. Or how, sometimes, I wanted it all to end not dramatically, just quietly. No one noticed. They called me deep. They said I was wise beyond my years. They praised the way I could dismantle meaning with a sentence. But they didn't see the pile of books stacked like walls around my bed. Or the unopened messages. Or the way I flinched when someone said, "You've been quiet lately." I wasn't quiet. I was screaming through metaphors. But no one speaks metaphor anymore. They speak noise. Small talk. Performance. So I read more. And more. And more. Until I stopped noticing the seasons change. Until the world outside felt like a myth. Until I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize my own reflection. This wasn't wisdom. It was hiding. Sophisticated, poetic hiding. And eventually, I had to ask the question no philosopher prepared me for. What if this is just another addiction? What if thinking deeply is just a prettier way of avoiding life? We say we're seeking truth. But maybe we're just avoiding pain. We romanticize the suffering. We quote Nietzsche about becoming stronger. But deep down, we're terrified of facing a life without illusions. So we cling to ideas, to names, to frameworks. And we pretend they're maps. But maps are useless if you never move. And I wasn't moving. Not forward. Not inward. Not anywhere. I quit philosophy the day I realized I was using it to explain away my own numbness. To stay safe. To stay small. To stay unseen. Because if you feel too much, they call you unstable. If you feel nothing, they call you wise. So I chose wise. But that was never the truth. The truth is, I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to grieve. I didn't want to live without meaning or admit that I never really had it. Philosophy gave me language. But it didn't give me life. And if you're honest with yourself, maybe you'll see it too. You're not searching. You're sheltering. Part 2. When meaning becomes a mask. I used to believe that meaning was the antidote to despair. That if I could just understand the pain, I could survive it. So I searched for meaning like it was oxygen. I begged books to save me. I begged gods I didn't believe in to explain themselves. But meaning, I learned, can be just as hollow as the pain it tries to soothe. You can build a philosophy around your suffering and still suffer. You can define the chaos and still drown in it. We love to talk about the search for meaning. It sounds noble, romantic, heroic. But sometimes it's just vanity. A desperate attempt to make our story look better on paper. As if giving your suffering a name somehow makes it beautiful. But it doesn't. Calling it existential dread doesn't make it hurt less. Saying I have a crisis of meaning doesn't stop the insomnia. The emptiness still hums beneath the surface. The nights are still silent and long. The mirror still refuses to lie. Meaning became my mask. I wore it well. I quoted Camus and talked about absurdity. I said things like the will to power and shadow integration. But underneath all of it, I was afraid. Afraid to admit that I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Afraid that life might just be what it is. Random. Unfair. Unforgiving. And what then? What happens when you strip away the mask? People get uncomfortable. They don't want raw truth. They want filtered suffering. Polished pain. The kind you can post about and still get likes. But I couldn't play that game anymore. I got tired of hiding behind intellect. Tired of using philosophy as a shield. Tired of pretending that understanding the mechanics of the void somehow protected me from falling into it. So I stopped talking. Stopped explaining. And for the first time, I listened. I listened to the silence I used to run from. To the ache I kept labeling as existential. To the part of me that didn't need quotes or frameworks or footnotes. Just truth. Naked. Ugly. Unbearable. And in that moment, I realized most of what we call meaning is just a way to avoid mourning. We don't want truth. We want anesthesia. We don't want freedom. We want control. And we don't want life. We want a version of life that we can understand and therefore predict. But life doesn't play by our rules. And neither does truth. So I let the mask fall. And for a while, there was nothing. No answers. No clarity. Just the rawness of being alive without a script. And it was terrifying. But it was real. And maybe that's the point. Maybe meaning isn't something you find. Maybe it's something you lose over and over. Until all that's left is the self you kept trying to escape. Part 3. The philosophy of numbness. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just stays. Like fog. Like cold air in an empty room. And we adapt to it. We call it being calm. We call it rationality. But it's not peace. It's not clarity. It's numbness. Numbness wrapped in intelligence. Numbness disguised as detachment. Numbness we justify by saying, I'm just not emotional. I told myself I was past all that. Too evolved to get angry. Too self-aware to feel jealous. Too philosophical to grieve. But I wasn't evolved. I was exhausted. Too tired to feel anymore. Too afraid to let life touch me. So I built walls out of ideas. I stacked theories like bricks. And the deeper the pain, the smarter I pretended to be. I said things like, "The self is an illusion. There is no inherent meaning. Everything is interpretation." And I believed them. Because believing them meant I didn't have to face what I really felt. The betrayal. The abandonment. The quiet loneliness that wrapped itself around my chest at 3 a.m. and whispered, "No one's coming." That's the truth I couldn't philosophize my way out of. No amount of Nietzsche, Jung, or Kierkegaard could hold me when I was falling apart in the dark. No quote could replace the warmth of someone who actually sees you and stays. No existential framework could stop the ache in my stomach when I realized I'd been talking about life for years, but hadn't really been living it. We intellectualize to survive. But survival isn't the same as healing. And philosophy, for all its brilliance, is a dangerous drug when used to avoid the rawness of human experience. It makes you articulate. It makes you sound wise. But it doesn't make you whole. Wholeness requires feeling. And feeling hurts. Especially when you've spent years pretending you're above it. I used to judge people who cried easily. Now I envy them. Because to cry is to feel. And to feel is to be alive. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I turned my heart into a thesis. My soul into a structure. My questions into armor. And what I got in return was a beautifully constructed prison. But here's the cruel irony. The more numb you become, the more philosophical you sound. People mistake your silence for depth. Your detachment for enlightenment. Your indifference for wisdom. But it's not wisdom. It's fear. It's grief. It's hunger. And eventually, the soul can't take it anymore. Eventually, it demands to be felt. So it breaks things. It sabotages your relationships. It pulls you into addictions. It whispers things like, "You're a fraud. You don't really believe any of this. You just want to be held." But who wants to hear that? So we quote another philosopher, post another insight, make another video, say something profound about the absurdity of life, and avoid living it one more day. But the body knows. The soul knows. And one day, they revolt. And when they do, no philosophy will save you. Only truth. Only feeling. Only the raw, bloody, unfiltered encounter with yourself. Part 4, when the books fall silent. There comes a moment when the words stop working. You read the same paragraph 5 times. You underline sentences that once moved you, but now feel like echoes in an empty house. You watch your favorite thinkers speak, and you hear nothing. Not because you've outgrown them, but because something in you has broken beyond explanation. That's when it begins. The real thing. Not the search. Not the ideas. But the silence beneath them. At first, it's unbearable. You miss the comfort of concepts. You miss the sharpness of analysis. You even miss the suffering because at least it gave you something to fight. But now there's nothing to fight. Nothing to defend. Nothing to prove. Only the stillness. The ache. The breath. You stare at the ceiling. You sit by the window. You feel your own heartbeat. Not as a metaphor. Not as a symbol. But as a pulse. You are alive. And you don't know what that means anymore. You stop asking questions. Not because you've found the answers, but because the questions no longer matter. You don't care about the nature of existence. You care about the taste of water, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the sound of someone saying your name without needing anything from you. You begin to notice things. The way your hands tremble when you're vulnerable. The way your body tightens when you lie. The way silence feels when it's not hiding from anything. And in that space, something soft appears. Not meaning, not truth. Something older. Presence. Stillness. Being. Not explained. Not understood. Just felt. And you realize all the books were pointing to this. Not to the answers, but to the place inside you that doesn't need them. The philosophers weren't gods. They were mirrors. Each one reflecting a part of your collapse. Each one whispering, "Go further. Go past me." But we clung to them. We turned them into idols. We mistook the signpost for the destination. Until the books fell silent. And the only voice left was your own. Cracked. Trembling. Unsure. But honest. And that honesty, that moment when you stop pretending to be wise and just become real, that's the first breath of freedom. Not the kind that comes from knowing, but the kind that comes from surrender. Surrender to not knowing. Surrender to being small. Surrender to the fact that life isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a fire to be felt. And maybe the real problem wasn't that we didn't have meaning. Maybe it's that we were too afraid to live without it, to love without it, to hurt without it. So we studied the maps and never took a step. But now, you're barefoot. You're on the ground. And for the first time, you're not trying to become anything. You're just here. And that's more sacred than any philosophy. Part 5. What's left after truth burns. When the truth burns everything, you expect to find clarity beneath the ashes. You think, now I'll know who I really am. But you don't. There's no identity waiting on the other side. No shining insight. No enlightenment. Just space. Open. Terrifying. Holy. The structures are gone. The labels are gone. Even the pain is quieter now. Not because it healed, but because you stopped trying to make it mean something. You're not wise. You're not broken. You're not anything. You're just here. And in that strange emptiness, you start to feel things again. Not ideas. Not meanings. Feelings. Not the ones that make good stories. The ones you buried long ago. Grief. Longing. Softness. Wonder. You begin to weep for no reason. Not because you're sad, but because you finally let yourself feel everything. And everything is overwhelming. You're not a philosopher anymore. You're a child in a burned-down house, holding the only thing the fire couldn't take. Your breath. It's not much, but it's real. You look around and see others, still clutching their books, still quoting their gods, still protecting themselves with ideas. And you don't judge them. You understand. You were there, too. It was necessary. Until it wasn't. Until your soul screamed loud enough to shatter the silence. Until the mask cracked. Until the numbness became unbearable. Until you chose life even if you didn't know what that meant. You realize now. The truth doesn't liberate you by explaining everything. It liberates you by destroying the need to explain. You don't need a reason to exist. You just need to feel what it's like to be here. To breathe. To break. To belong not to a system or a belief, but to the ache itself. The ache that reminds you you are alive. Not because you solved the riddle. Not because you read the right book. But because, somehow, you made it through the fire. And you didn't turn to stone. What's left is not a conclusion. It's not a theory. It's not even wisdom. It's presence. It's tenderness. It's the courage to live without guarantees. To walk through life without a map. Only a compass drawn in your ribs. And maybe, that's enough. Not to be understood, but to be real. Not to escape suffering, but to suffer with your eyes open. Not to become something great, but to be exactly what you are. And nothing more. Part 6, The Quiet Rebirth. There's no applause at the end of this journey. No revelation. No divine voice saying, "You've made it." Only silence. And the soft weight of your own breath. You sit there. No longer trying to become someone. No longer chasing answers. No longer needing life to make sense. You just sit. And in that stillness, a strange warmth rises. Not joy. Not peace. Something deeper. Something nameless. Like a heartbeat you forgot was yours. This is the rebirth no one talks about. Not dramatic. Not visible. Just a subtle return. To your own skin. To the present moment. To the quiet truth that you never really left. You just hid. You hid behind intellect. Behind perfection. Behind pain dressed in philosophy. But now, you're bare. You're soft. You're uncertain. And that's holy. You no longer need to speak in metaphors. You no longer need to know who you are. You are not a brand. Not a thinker. Not even a seeker. You are breath. You are wound. You are witness. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the only real enlightenment is learning how to stay when everything in you wants to run. So you stay. And the world, for the first time in a long time, feels real again. And maybe one day, you'll pick up the books again. Not to save yourself, but to remember who you were before the silence found you. But not today. Today, you're not reading. You're not running. You're not escaping into ideas. Today, you are simply here, breathing, feeling, beginning again, quietly. The goal was never understanding. The goal was presence.